Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. One of the most challenging aspects of Bonsetti treatment is bracing. So my assignment is to talk about bracing, practicalities and problems. So this is what you should not use the brace for. Yeah. I always tell them it's not a handle, but on the other hand, Monica said make it fun. So maybe the kids like this. So the bracing, we used to call it FAO, but now I see the new terminology is FAB. I guess because it's fabulous, it's fab. So the foot abduction brace used to be a Dennis Brown bar when we started. Now we have better ones. And it starts when the post-tenotomy cast is removed. We were taught initially to set the braces at 70-40. Now we're doing more 60-30 and 60-60 for regular bilateral cases. And the width of the brace should be the shoulder width. So this little guy with the red jumper is probably got too narrow a brace. You know, it's just a little bit too close. It should be shoulder width. No one's really talked about it, but when you apply braces first day after the cast is removed, you shouldn't tell them to wear it 23 hours a day. You have to break in over a period of about 3 or 4 days. If you put them in the braces full time the first night, they're going to get blisters. Do you agree? Okay. What's wrong with this guy? A little bit too narrow, I think. A little bit, not quite shoulder width, even though it's a small guy. So why brace? Why do we do a brace? Because the foot abduction brace keeps the medial soft tissues on stretch. External rotation with a bent bar means ankle dorsiflexion. As soon as you put a bend in the bar, it dorsiflexes the ankles. And the children kick with the bar, and as they kick, they stretch their gastrocnemius. That's a good thing. And we know from many studies that if you don't use the bar, you get relapses. So another good reason to use the brace. There are, however, some children who never use the brace, or they're non-compliant, and they don't get relapses. But we don't like to let our parents know this because they're all going to think, oh, that'll be my child. So we can't predict who's going to be a non-relapser despite non-bracing. So we brace everybody. And this is where we set it, 70-40. You can go 60-30. And for the atypical feet, 30-30, although after listening to Jose's talk, you said you can get more abduction in the atypical feet. But do you brace them at 30-30, or do you brace to start? Okay, and then gradually increase. Okay. So the protocol calls us to brace full-time for 3 months and then wean down to nights only until they're 4 or 5 years old. I tell all my parents you have to go at least until 4. That's the minimum. And if you're really good parents, you'll go till 5. And if you're super good, you'll go to 6. So that's the bar. I set the bar a little bit high for them. And they all want to be good. They're all competitive. So they want to, they know they're going to get to 4, but they want to hit 5 and maybe 6. I do have one unfortunate child in my practice who's now 11 years old, and his parents are still making him use the brace. I think this is child abuse, but I can't get them to stop. I recently saw him, and they said they stopped for a while, and they sensed he was getting a bit of a relapse, and so they put him back in. But anyway. 4 minimum, and try to get it to 5 or 6. Now, here's a good question. When you, after the 3 months, when you're ready to go to the nighttime only protocol, how do you do it? So you can do it cold turkey. You can do it gradually. How many people do it cold turkey, just right away? Okay. How many people do it gradually? Okay. So we have to take our marching orders from Iowa. So if you look on the Bonsetti International Association website, it went from God to Bonsetti, from Bonsetti to Merquende, and from Merquende to the rest of us. So this is what it says. It says at the end of that 3 months, you shouldn't just stop, but you should go 1 month at 20 to 22 hours, 2 months at 18 to 20 hours, 3 months at 16 to 18 hours, and then at 4 months, you get it down to 14, which I guess is nighttime. So the weaning, and the people who advocate this say that it's a more gradual change for the children and they're less likely to reject it. Other people, Hemel and his group in Ichalov say that they have lower relapse rates when they do this sort of continued weaning process. I'll tell you what I do in my practice. I offer them 3 options. Option 1 is cold turkey. Option 2, everyone understand that? Cold turkey, it's English? No. All right, it's like all at once. First night, down to nights and naps. Option 2 is the Ponseti International recommendation. And option 3 is the modified recommendation. Instead of 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, it's 1 week, 2 week, 3 week. So this same process, but over every week changing instead of every month changing. So, yes, Jose.
Sorry, in the United States, I would say 80% of the families, the mom is working, and so the kids go to daycare. I don't know here in Israel. But if that's the situation, it's very hard for the daycare to put the shoes on and off during the naps, and they can get skin problems. In those cases, then it's very difficult to follow this protocol. This is if mom is home, then the kid sleeps less and less, the naps are shorter and shorter, that you can do this way. Otherwise, I just recommend to do like 14, 16 hours at night and in the morning, and then take it off by the daycare, leave it off until the parents come to pick the kid up, and then do the night. Because otherwise, you will see problems. That's the only modification.
Okay, thank you. We know from Dobbs' work in 2004 that there are some risk factors that predict recurrence, and the big risk factors in his initial study were non-compliance with the foot abduction brace and education level of the parents less than high school. So if you know this ahead of time, you can target that population, the patients who didn't graduate high school, target them for a little bit more love and calling them and staying on top of them. A similar study by Jawadi, published in 2015, they looked at noncompliance and found that it was associated with more children per family, because the family doesn't have time to take care of this problem, unilateral clubfoot more than bilateral, and the inability of a single parent to apply the brace by themselves. Those were the major factors in noncompliance. When we first started, this was the most common brace that was used. It was the Markel brace. It's not used a whole lot anymore because now we have better, more comfortable designs. But that's what we used for an awful long time. And then there are many modifications of the Markel brace. And so you can, the local orthotists make their own versions. This is a slide I got from Monica from a Brazilian adjustable Dennis Brown bar. And in the developing world, Steenbeck, who's an orthotist, developed a easily manufactured bar that could be made in the developing world for only about $12 per. So these are many types of devices. The problem, a lot of them are a little bit difficult to use. They're not modular. Along came John Mitchell, who worked with Dr. Ponseti in Iowa, and they came up together with what we now call the Ponseti-Mitchell shoe. It was based on numerous measurements. This is John Mitchell. I saw him a couple weeks ago in Disneyland, and so that he's the one in the middle, next to Scooby-Doo and Velma. But he's done a lot of work in popularizing these modular braces that we use in our clinic. They look something like this, and what's nice is that they have a quick release mechanism, so you can put the shoes on independently and then add the bar after the fact. They also have versions for arthrogrypotic and paralytic feet. They're a little more rigid to prevent equinus. And they've played around with a dynamic model, but for various reasons, Dr. Ponseti, who was working with Dr. Mitchell at the time, never felt that the dynamic braces were good because they allow the foot to go into equinus, and so they've never come out with such a device. It is important to have this type of feature in any bar that you use. You want an easy in, easy out. Any bar that's totally fixed to the shoes is very hard to put on the child, so it's better to have detachable shoes that fit onto a bar with an easy clip mechanism. Along came Dobbs, who was a student of Ponseti. Dobbs was a Ponseti fellow, and he went back to St. Louis, Missouri, and he developed a big clubfoot practice and developed a flexible bar. This is one of the earlier versions of the dynamic Dobbs bar. It hit the internet by storm, and a lot of parents got very enthusiastic about it. Dobbs had a study in which, and this is him studying his own brace, in which he found when he compared it to the old braces, the rigid braces, they had 41% noncompliance versus 7% noncompliance with the flexible bar. And the relapse rate was similarly much better, only 4% with the Dobbs bar and 31%. So you have to be a little bit suspicious, though, when the guy who invented the bar and is making profits from it, possibly, I don't know, is telling you that his bar is better. So hold that thought, because there are other studies in the literature as well, and the cost is more expensive. Although the original Dobbs bar had very expensive AFOs built into it. This is probably the least expensive bar on the market, the Ugandan version of the Dennis Brown bar. It's the Steenbeck orthosis. That's Shafiq Pirani in the background, Dr. Ponseti, at one of the Ponseti courses. This is the one that I started using. We no longer use this one. And there have been many studies. So here's a study by Zients from Los Angeles about the Mitchell-Ponseti brace. Found skin problems in 14%, recurrence in 48%, and a 21% anterior tibialis tendon transfer. That's a bit higher than what Jose is seeing in his population. 84% used the brace for a minimum of 3 years. The same group or a similar group out in Los Angeles came out with this brace. This is a flexible plastic brace, and so it bolts to the shoes, but it's a flexible plastic so the kids can move, and the more motion they have, the more comfortable they are. Now, whether or not it's as effective in the clubfoot is a whole other question. So they had a very small study with only 8 children, so I can't recommend or not recommend this bar just on the basis of a case report, a case series of 8 kids. There's something called the Miracle Feet organization. This is a group that does a lot of outreach to the developing world. And so they're concerned about having a modular system that would be inexpensive so you could use it in the developing world. And they came up with the Miracle Foot Brace, which is $20 per, lightweight, and comes in 2 different sizes. So I have no experience with this, but it's what they're using in their outreach centers. And then the latest player is the Iowa brace, and maybe we'll hear more about this from Dr. Morquende, who was instrumental in the development of this brace. This uses straps with grommets. It's one of the claims to fame is that a child cannot remove it by themselves. You need to have 2 hands to remove it, so kids can't wriggle out of it. But it is modular and is soft and seems to eliminate the problems of the sores on the front of the ankle. So we'll wait to hear more about that brace. Then there's alternatives to the foot abduction brace, because many of you who've been doing this no doubt have had experience with patients who come in and families come in and said, we're done. We can't take this anymore. We're finished. And so what do you do? In my practice, I go to a flexible brace. So if they can't deal with the Mitchell-Ponseti brace, then I say, let's try this before you give up. And we switch to the Dobbs brace, and in 90% of the cases, in my experience, that settles it. The child gets used to the Dobbs brace very quickly, and they're back on track. Now, whether or not the Dobbs brace is the best, I don't know. It's not my go-to brace. It's not the brace I ever start with, but it's my rescue brace if I have a family that's about to quit. That's my plan B. I also have a plan C, and the plan C is something like this, a KAFO. Not my first choice, but better than nothing. So some of the parents will tell you, well, the child was going crazy, so I took off the bar, but at least he had the shoes on. And so I tell them, well, the magic is in the bar, not the shoes. So it doesn't do any good to have the shoes on without the bar. The shoes by themselves have no therapeutic function. And likewise, I think an AFO is really no therapeutic function as far as clubfoot bracing. KAFO maybe, because a KAFO looks a lot like a Ponseti cast, a long leg Ponseti cast. So I think that is an option. So this is my plan C. We don't use a KFO, we use a cast that we bivalve and finish up with Velcro straps. And we change that every 2 months. Then you maybe heard about this guy. This is called the ADM. And the internet, again, is very rife with all these buzz and Facebook and parents talking about, what about the ADM? What about the ADM? And so there's many claims about this, but none of them are substantiated. There's not a single reported series that I can find that showed that this does any good. But this is an attempt to have some kind of derotational plus dorsiflexion plus, et cetera, brace. And they're even touting it for daytime wear in shoes. So it's a nighttime brace, but it's also, you can hook it up to your Nikes, or your New Balance, sorry, and wear it during the daytime. And then in the United States, this is the hot thing. Have you heard about this one also? This is the Cunningham flexible spiral brace. And so here's Mr. Cunningham. He's an orthotist who lives in Maine. And believe it or not, I've got patients who are making the pilgrimage to his little store in Maine so they can get one of these made. And it's, kind of a fancy spiral, custom-made KFO. And, the appeal for it is that there's no bar. There's no bar. Great. Because as soon as you take away the bar, the kids are happy. I mean, kids will wear this, but as soon as you put a bar in, then it's a bit of an issue. So again, lots of claims on the internet, lots of testimonials from patients and parents, but nothing scientific. But I think it's important that we be aware of this because your patients are doing research on the internet, at least my patients are, and when they come to you, you have to be able to respond. And I always tell people, number one, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. And number two, my job is to be a little bit of a judge and an arbiter to tell them, what is good, what's not good, what has evidence behind it, and what doesn't have evidence behind it. But if a family is really convinced that they want this for their child, I don't stop them. I don't stand in their way. And if anything else, it's just interesting to me. I get to see it. I get a few pictures. I can make some slides. And I follow the child. But I don't condone it, but I don't divorce them from my practice either. They're still allowed to come back and see me. Thank you, Mr. Cunningham, for that. So there are pitfalls in bracing. That's from his website, by the way. He's got a nice family picture. His wife runs the business, and he's the orthotist. So one of the problems is incomplete correction. The braces won't stay on or relapse. So whenever you see braces falling off, the Dennis Brown bars and boots, it means that likely you're developing a relapse. There's some problems with braces, poor neuromuscular development. If you brace too long, I think that's an issue. We know already that kids walk about a month later than their peers if they undergo this whole Ponseti process. Not that that's such a bad thing, but it's one of the things I worry about with prolonged bracing, that prolonged daytime bracing, that is, that it could delay development. And then when they're on the brace, they're usually on their back, and when they're lying on their back, they get plagiocephaly and sometimes torticollis. So I'm not a big fan of prolonged daytime bracing beyond the 3 months. So I usually recommend to my families, I present them the options. You can go, the full Ponseti International Association recommendation, 4-month withdrawal phase, or you can go cold turkey. You decide, and they usually choose cold turkey. So, and tummy time is important. So if they are going to be in braces, instruct them that when the child is supervised, the child should be on their stomach so that they can develop the extensor muscles and that they don't get plagiocephaly from spending the first 4 months of their life on their back. There's some problems with the preemies. It was mentioned a few times this morning. Do not go to the ICU and brace preemies. Don't cast preemies. It's miserable. I mean, they correct really quickly because they're very supple, but then you can't brace them because they're so small. The second thing that'll happen is you're going to put on a cast in the NICU, and you're going to get called the next day to take it off because they want to get heel sticks. They need blood, or they want to weigh the baby, and how much does the baby weigh? They can't tell with the cast. So just do not put any casts on the NICU and your life will be much better. Just wait until the child graduates. And if you want to have the therapist do some stretching or make some splints, that's okay. But don't do any casting. We've already talked about the atypical and requiring somewhat different bracing. What about this situation when the family comes in, they're waving the white flag, they surrender, they can't do it anymore, they give up? Well, that's part of the problem, but part of the problem also, I think Jose alluded to it, or Monica, that the doctor gives up. And we're not allowed that luxury. You know, we're supposed to be the cheerleader. You know, this is our job to say, rah, rah, yay, go team. So we're not allowed to get discouraged. It's not part of not in our wheelhouse. We can't do that. We have to be cheerleaders. And to a certain extent, you have to take a public health approach to this. And if there's problems with the bracing, you have to figure out what the problems are and how to surmount them. Dr. Shafiq Pirani used to talk about obstacles to adherence. So we don't even like to use the word non-compliant because the word non-compliant has negative connotations, it's pejorative, and it sounds like we're saying something bad about the family, they're non-compliant. Instead, what we should be thinking of is, what are the barriers to compliance? What are the things that are standing in the way? You know, family issues, financial issues, travel issues. What is it? You know, it could be in Uganda or it could be, you know, here in Haifa. But it's part of our job is to sort out what those problems are. So that's the public health approach. It may require follow-up phone calls to your problem families. If, for example, you know that a family didn't graduate high school, then you or your clubfoot coordinator perhaps should be calling those patients and staying on top of them to personalize the treatment. And we call that removing barriers to adherence. Protection. We all should have some protection. So I learned about this from my families and on the internet. But they like to pad the bars with these pads to protect the child, themselves, and the furniture. And they often use a little bit of foam pipe insulation covered with tape. And this is one I didn't know. I learned this from the parents, that if you use a sleep sack or a grow bag at night, it keeps the baby from pulling on the straps and laces. So go figure. You guys use that? Yeah. So I direct my families to the internet because there are some family groups that are very good and they're been around for a long time. And they can get a lot of their questions answered very quickly, like, you know, car seats and grow bags and sleep sacks and things like that. But we should be thinking in terms of family-centered care and a public health approach to this problem. And it's good to have literature that you give your families. And so in my clinic, we have these little booklets that we give them so they have something to take home. And to remove those barriers, we indoctrinate our parents. I advocate for parent support groups on the internet. There are many that are available. There's Facebook pages. I think it's also good to have a clubfoot nurse or therapist that helps they sometimes have more time than you do to spend with the patient. And you have to monitor compliance until they're successful. And that's the public health approach. So don't ignore relapses. If you see it starting to relapse and you have to do something, less than 2.5 years, you recast and then repeat the bracing. More than 2.5 years, you can recast and you may consider doing a tibialis anterior tendon transfer and TAL. We'll talk about that. I found in my life it's easier if I have a clubfoot coordinator. At various times in the past 20 years, I've had either a PT, a nurse, or a PA who acts as my clubfoot clinic coordinator, that they can help with casting, with the database, education of families and also residents, and compliance with the bracing. So it doesn't all fall on the doctor to do all those things. Now, this is something also I downloaded from the Ponseti Info website, the Ponseti International Association website. And this is, I'm not sure where the data is all from, but it's on the internet, so it must be true, right? So this is, according to Jose, if you stop your brace at age 1, you have a 90% chance of relapse. If you stop bracing at 2, it's 70 to 80%. If you stop at 3, it's 30 to 40%. If you stop at 4, it's down to 10 to 15%. So this is, ammunition. You can show this to your families and say, this is why you have to keep bracing until they're 4. I mean, do you want to have a 70 to 80% chance of relapse, or would you rather have a 10 to 15% chance? So which group do you want to be in? And, that's a useful thing. Running out of time, but let's talk about a few other things. There have been some studies talking about comparing bracing. So this is a study that compared the Dobbs brace with a non-flexible brace, and there was not a whole lot of difference between the two. This is a comparison of the Dennis Brown brace with the Dobbs brace. Not a huge study, 28 kids, but no significant differences in the effectiveness between the two braces. So I think it's important to balance these studies with the Dobbs study because these people are not involved in the brace, they're just studying it. This is a comparison, another comparison of the Mitchell shoes and the dynamic Dobbs brace. Not a huge study, it was 15 in each group, but there was no difference between the two groups. So no difference. So people who claim that the dynamic brace is more successful may or may not be true. This is a study that didn't compare two braces, but it's a unique novel brace. They call it the accordion brace, and it's something that allows the feet to come together and go apart. And they found in their study of 90 kids a 7.5% relapse rate, but this is relatively short-term follow-up. So I can't advocate this brace, nor do I think it's commercially available. And then this is another study that looked at comparing regular boots and bar braces with the unilateral braces, the KFOs and AFOs, and they found that the relapse rate was much higher for these unilateral style braces than they were for the ones that have a bar. So another reason not to use the unilateral braces as opposed to the boots and bars. And then finally, this is a study that looked at adding a pressure sensor, and as soon as you do scientific studies like this where you put sensors in the shoes, you get all kinds of interesting information because the families may tell you that they're using the boots and bars, but if you download the data from the pressure sensor, you find that the compliance really falls off quite a bit in the first 3 months. But we know there's complications of bracing. We've seen skin pressure sores. I don't know if you've seen contralateral flat foot or excessive torsion, but those also have been studied in the literature. This is a study by Stephanie Boom and Mark Sinclair looking to see if doing these braces induced external tibial torsion. They said it did not. And a more recent study, or a study a few years ago in Japan, looked at the question of whether or not the opposite normal foot became flat from the excessive rotation in a boots and bar type foot abduction brace. And they did find a significant flat foot development. I have seen some flat feet in my kids, and so some of them I take the bar back to almost 0 degrees on the normal side. So in conclusion, there are many pitfalls in bracing. Incomplete correction make bracing impossible. Preemies are too small for the smallest shoes, so use splints or wait until they're older. Atypical feet require less abduction. Non-compliance is a problem when the family gives up, but it's even more severe problem when the doctor gives up, so never, never give up. Don't ignore relapses because it never gets better by itself. My tips for success: use appropriate bracing. You could use the Markel, the Mitchell, the Dobbs. Walking age non-compliance, consider a KFO as your third round. Public health approach to bracing, I think, was useful for keeping people on track. Don't ignore relapses, and encourage your patients, or demand really, that they brace until age 4, and if they're really good parents, they should go to 5 or 6 years of age. Thank you very much.